Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pal's Go to the Movies. This is another Throwback Thursday review. I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hi, everyone.
And today we're going to be reviewing Shark Tale from 2004. And just a warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. When a son of a gangster shark boss is accidentally killed while on the hunt, his would-be prey and his vegetarian brother decide to use this incident to their own advantage. I'm going to start off this review like I always do by going down my pros. This movie had a lot of famous voices. You know, we had Will Smith, Robert De Niro, Renee Zellweger. We even had Martin Scorsese. There's a lot of famous names in this movie. The positive thing is that it's an animated film, so you can have all these people together but not necessarily have them recording at the same time. But there's a fun fact that most of these people did record their lines together in the same booth or same studio at the same time. So that's kind of a weird thing for them to do nowadays, because nowadays you go into the booth separately and you record by yourself for your own lines, which is that's the norm. So for my second pro, this movie had what I want to call the Finding Nemo effect, where it had a lot of characters who were portrayed as fishes, but then you saw them act like humans. For example, Will Smith's character, we saw him try to act like his fins were feet and stuff like that, and moonwalk in some part of the movie. Other parts of this movie, we saw it have like human elements to it. We did see at the beginning where they shot this sushi restaurant and then they made kind of a joke. Sushi bar for fish kind of thing didn't work. Even the chef kind of slammed the knife on the table. So to me, those little elements, they were funny, but not to me, but I can see it being funny to kids. And this is what I want to call the target audience for this movie, kids. This is a movie that families go to see, but the parents can zone out in. That's enough for my pros. Let me go on to my cons. This movie had a bunch of jokes that did not work. They were jokes on top of jokes. For example, this is evident in the scene where the shark, played by Robert De Niro, when he's talking to Martin Scorsese's character in the Titanic ship, there's a record playing and they're talking and the music stops scratching and he starts saying, "Hey, the record." The octopus starts tampering with the record and it starts playing the song Big Butts. Then they start looking at each other and then the octopus says, "Hey boss, it's the Big Butt song." You know, I'm like, that joke was not even supposed to be there. It didn't add anything to it, but I can see how little kids would have been giggling it in the theater. So to me, that's like one of those jokes that it's just made for kids. It's my idea of a poop joke. Adults don't laugh at those, but little kids do. There's a joke that it was more sophisticated right before that the adult understood. Another con about this movie was that there's a lot of product placement in this movie. They changed the names just to be funny, but there is so many things in here that are just like flashing in your face. I'm not really sure if the companies paid the company to put their image in there. It just didn't sit well with me. It was too much. I didn't really enjoy that part of the movie. You know, and then the biggest con of this movie for me was that how they took the Martin Scorsese's movies like The Godfather or Goodfellas and stuff like that, like the mob movies, and they try to flip it and make it into this animated movie and make fun of them, but at the same time keep it kind of serious with Martin Scorsese inside of it. So it's like having the guy in the movie and making fun of his work. In a sense, it's not trying to make fun of it, but it's trying to honor him. But in a sense, I didn't see this coming through in this movie. So with that said, I'm going to throw this to my friend Touly and see how he saw the movie and see what grade he gave the movie.
So I did watch this film when it came out back in 2004 in theaters. So it's not so much as a throwback review here for me, because I'm gonna actually talk about this film from the perspective of having watched it that very first time and how I felt about it to how I feel about it today, and whether or not it was able to withstand the test of time or did it age well, as the saying goes here when we talk about films. I'm gonna come out and say that after watching the film in theaters, I didn't think it was that bad of a film. I wouldn't say that it was great either. It's definitely not like up there as one of my favorite DreamWorks sort of film. I'm actually a very big fan of Shrek and Shrek 2, actually. If I were to say Shrek 2 was probably my favorite out of the Shrek movies. And even in that film, there were like product placements, or the movie was making fun of, you know, certain brands and stuff, just like they did here in Shark Tale, which to me, I didn't mind too much, to the point where if the film starts to be kind of lackluster, you know, treading in the wrong direction, then perhaps those sort of product placement would sort of irk me, get on my nerves a bit, because then I would start questioning as to why they would focus so much attention on this aspect of the film versus trying to just make a more polished film altogether. So in that retrospect, I kind of see where Sal's coming from, where maybe he was a bit more annoyed about the amount of product placements that was in this film. Because certainly I do feel about that for like other movies or TV series that I watched where I just didn't like the film enough. And then when I saw all these product placements, it just really rubbed me the wrong way. But for this film, because I didn't think it was that bad of a film, maybe I was able to sort of overlook those sort of things. But to Sal's point of the film being overly committed to its comedy, I do share similar feelings about that, where it was too overdone for my taste. There were certain jokes in there that, made me laugh, not like to the point where I was crying or anything, but it got some chuckles out of me. I sort of saw that sushi scene a bit different from Sal, where he said that it was more intended for like kids and maybe kids would have found that funny. I actually looked at it in the opposite direction, where maybe the kids would not have gone that joke, might have found that scene more terrifying, because you're indicating that this movie is about your main character being a fish and that fish are getting fed to other fishes or other creatures in the ocean, which, I mean, let's be honest, that's what happened. It's the circle of life, or how nature works, whatever you want to call it. For me, I saw that more from like an adult perspective, and I found that to be an accurate representation of nature, really, when I saw that scene. So I didn't really look down upon that scene. But in terms of the tone of the film, though, those are the sort of scenes, and I can mention other scenes too from the film, where I found it conflicting, because I felt like the movie was trying too hard to please two types of audience. Sal mentioned that this film was more intended for children, which upon watching the trailer, if I can recall, I would immediately assume the same thing, like this was a movie made for children. But with the introduction of the sharks and their crime lord, and how Sal mentioned the portrayal of like the Godfather in here, I could imagine that that's not something that kids can relate to, that they will understand. So if the kids can't understand that, then I'm left to assume that those sort of scenes or those sort of tone were made more for the adults. So now we have this push and pull sort of thing going on, where we have certain parts of the film being dedicated for the kids and then certain parts being dedicated to the adults. And to me, that's my biggest problem with this film. I understand where they were going for in terms of like our main character, Oscar, who was played by Will Smith, the sort of ambition that he was trying to strive for, regardless of how you feel about his character, whether or not you liked his character because of the way he was portrayed. Maybe there was not enough context to give you as an audience to sort of root for him because of his outlandish personality, the sort of overconfidence that you see in him. And I kind of see that too, where there were times where I didn't feel that I wanted to root for this guy because the movie didn't do a good enough job to set me up to feel that way about him, based on the upbringing that he had, the sort of struggle that he had to go through to sort of become this person that wants to climb to the top and have all the money and popularity and whatnot, and the sort of downfall that he should have suffered in order for me to sort of root for them after the fact. Like, it wasn't enough. Like, there wasn't enough consequences. But back to my premise about the movie trying to please the children audience and the adult audience, I felt like it should have just gone one way or the other. I think it's safe to assume when it comes to like an animated film, first and foremost, you want to try to please the children because it's just the sort of style that would gravitate towards these audience versus your adult audience. Sure, you could throw in some adult humor in there, but it should mostly cater towards the kids. So when you're kind of leaning on these darker themes, like I said, crime lords and whatnot, I think you have kind of gone beyond what you should. And if that's the case, then you should just make this more adult oriented, but be it in an animated film sort of style. Because of this, that's where I struggle to appreciate it in the sort of light that it could have been had it just been told in such a way that would have catered more towards the younger audience. And of course, Sal also mentioned the star power that was in this film, the amount of actors and actresses that were in this film. When I see these sort of stuff, I'm sort of conflicted because two thoughts come to mind. And those thoughts are they trying to cover how good this film really is by adding such actors into this film, the amount of star power in this film? Or is this film just going to get elevated that much more because it was already good, but because you have these sort of star power in it, that was just going to make it that much better? So it could either be really, really good because of the amount of stars that they have in this film, or it could bring it down a notch because they're just trying to cover up what's already lacking in the film. And for me, it kind of worked in the negative side where the film wasn't good enough to already have these sort of star power in it. I felt like it was a cover up of the movie's shortcoming. But the movie's only an hour and 30 minutes, and the movie for being that long, there wasn't a lot of scenes, so I could kind of see that both as a positive and negative, because I thought the film was only okay. Adding anything more to it would not have made a difference. But at the same time, had they just committed more important scenes within that amount of time frame, the movie would have been that much better as well. Because I've talked to Sal on his podcast here about other animated films where they're normally around this range, but they do a really good job at storytelling because every scene tends to matter. Whereas this one, there was just not enough scene really, again, to get me behind a lot of the characters in this film. And I'm just going to wrap it up and go into the end and talk about Robert De Niro's character and the mob that he's in charge of. To me, I found that kind of unbelievable that he came to that sort of epiphany at the end about accepting who his son was and that nothing bad was going to come out of that. Because if he was going to embrace the sort of creature that he was as a shark, I would have expected something tragic to have happened. And again, this kind of plays back to Will Smith's character, Oscar, and the sort of consequences that would have arrived based on the decision that he made earlier on by trying to portray himself as being a shark slayer. Had they sort of just elevated this to a degree where there was some sort of consequences involved, then I would have appreciated the film a lot more. But again, seeing that this is more intended for children, I can understand why they wouldn't go that route. But at the same time, when you're introducing things that revolve kind of heavily on the adult side, then I sort of expected that as well. So the film sort of played with my expectations, and because of that, it didn't kind of follow through. Like I said, I understand what they were going for and I could follow, but it just wasn't enough to make me feel like it was a really great animated film, especially from DreamWorks. So in the end, I'm going to give a film a 5 out of 10. Like, it's not one of those films where I would go back and rewatch. I mean, I did it here because of the Throwback review, but I don't think I would say it was like a horrible film either. I would even go as far and recommend this film if you're into animated films, but just don't expect anything too special about it. It's your average animated film, which to me sounds really conflicting again because DreamWorks has come up with some pretty good stuff in the past.
I agree with things Touly said, especially with Oscar's character. I really wanted Oscar's character to get developed more. We do see him kind of talk about his father and how he didn't want to be his father at the beginning of the film. And then at the end, he embraced it. So touch upon that. I mean, it's a little thing we could have gotten deeper into and basically cared about Oscar, versus I didn't really care about him. I actually thought he was an obnoxious character, like Touly said, and I agree. This movie is nothing great, but it's not horrible, but I do have my little bones to pick with it, especially there's some scenes, like we know it's underwater, but when Robert De Niro is feeding the piranhas, he opens the aquarium and is trying to show us that there's water in there, and then they do like a double tone color for the water. Also, when the octopus is trying to serve tea, he pours the tea and the tea goes up or something. I'm like, all these little things to me is just like, what are you trying to do? Especially what Touly said, when you have the tones of the mob in there. Yeah, a lot of kids won't get that, but adults will, especially when there's some references to Martin Scorsese's films and stuff like that. There's even a billboard with Jaws on there, things like that. It's like, to me, it's a hit and miss sometimes, but overall, it's not a bad movie. I would actually, like Touly said, I would recommend it. If you have little kids and they like Finding Nemo, play it for them and then let them see how they react to it, how they rank it up with other movies. This is DreamWorks, the other one's Pixar. There's different studios out there. Let them see what the variety is. Don't just feed them one thing. Let them see the array of movies out there and studios out there since the beginning, since they're small kids. So for me, my grade, it's basically going to be a 5 out of 10. So this does it for this review of Shark Tales. Please join us next time where we're going to review Boondock Saints.
What's the symbology there?
Symbology? Now that Duffy has relinquished his King Bonehead crown, I see we have an heir to the throne. I'm sure the word you were looking for was symbolism. What is the symbolism there? Let me explain it to you.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find our social media links below. And like always, keep watching movies.